Welcome back to the Lou Perez podcast. My name is Lou Perez, and I'm happy to report that right now you can order my book. That's right, I wrote a book. It's called That Joke Isn't Funny Anymore, on the death and rebirth of comedy. Follow the link in the description or head over to Amazon and search for Lou Perez, That Joke Isn't Funny Anymore. If you want other options on how you can buy my book, please sign up for my newsletter at thelouperez.com. You could also join my community at thelouperez.locals.com. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to the podcast. And if you could leave a 5-star review, that would be amazing. Whether you're a long-time listener or a first-time, 5-star reviews are lovely. If you're looking for other ways you can support me, you could do so by supporting my sponsors. If you're into CBD products, please check out PalomaVerdeCBD.com. Use promo code Lou to get 25% off purchases over $75. And if you like cold brew, check out Black Organic Cold Brew at www.blvckbrew.com and use promo code Lou for free shipping. All right, let's go. I'm very happy to be joined by my next guest. She is the owner and booker of the Creek and the Cave Comedy Club in Austin, Texas. Please give it up for Rebecca Trent. I always say please give it up as if there's actually a live audience here, but there is not a live audience. Very much, yeah. I wanted to start off by just letting people know that the Creek and the Cave used to be in Queens. It used to be in Long Island City. And one of my biggest comedy regrets is I lived in LA. That's not the regret. I was in LA for like...
Are you sure?
I was there for like 4 or 5 years. And I think it was when I was in LA, I think that's when you guys opened in Queens. And then when I moved back to New York, I really regret not spending more time at the Creek and the Cave, like not coming down because of... I was in Brooklyn. You guys were on a weird subway line, and I don't know where I was going. I don't know where I was getting up at that time. But one of my regrets is that I wasn't able to to be part of the fun and the community that you built over there. And then you went and moved it even farther away to Austin. But maybe we could just start with how you came about to bring about, the Creek and the Cave to begin with.
All right. The Creek was a place where I did performances at through a group called the Queens Players, which still exists. Or maybe the Queens Players don't exist, but they're now called the Secret Theater. I'm not exactly sure, but there is still an entity run by Richard Mazza out in Queens. And they rehearsed out of that space and did performances out of the space. I became involved with the theater company. We started directing this really incredible show called Lysistrata, Revenging the Bush, which was a musical. You
have to go further. You have to go deeper than that. I mean, with a title like that, what was happening on it?
It was a musical that was basically like an anti-war piece where, like Lysistrata, the Greek play, women refused to have sex in order to end the war. And this one had, instead of like the goddess coming out, the all-knowing goddess, it was Oprah. And Billy Staples, actually, who used to be on the Run and Fez show years ago, he wrote a song for it. And we had the entrances on the wings side were these giant foam vaginas with this like crazy like hairy yarn that looked like pubic hair. And there was a giant 8-foot-long ramp that ended in the head of a dick. And at the end of the whole show, it shot white confetti out over everybody. It was one of the coolest things I've ever done. It was so much fun. So many amazing people were involved with it. It was really cool. It was a really great experience. So we were doing that. And while we were doing that, sometimes the bartenders just wouldn't show up, but we still had to hang out and drink afterwards. So we would go downstairs and we would drink, and I would just beer, like stuff that was in cans or bottles or whatever, and we would leave the money on the bar. And a couple of weeks go by, and finally somebody's like, "What's all this money being left on the bar?" And we told them, and then they were like, "You want a job?" So I started working there, and then I became the manager of the bar because nobody was doing it, basically. And then the fellas that owned the place didn't want to own it anymore. They wanted to sell it, and I didn't really like the folks that were looking around to do it. So I basically bought myself a job, did some music in there for a little while, because that's what they were doing before, and it was destroying the neighborhood, and the people that were living above me were gonna start sending me death threats like any second now. So we stopped doing music, and we did a little bit of theater, and that felt silly because Broadway's right there, and it's like, why are you doing like community theater in a place where there's Broadway? It just seems weird.
Yeah, at the beginning of the origin story, you guys, leaving money on the bar because the bartenders weren't showing up. I think it really highlights one of the problems for artists, where it's like, there's so many artists out there or theaters that have absolutely like no like just the bare minimum of like business acumen. Like, you got to show up, you should be collecting money, and that's how you're going to keep your shit going. It's so just even like you're automatically like so many steps ahead if you're just able to just show up and do your job.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So we just and I had when I talked to a couple of people who wanted to like buy in, and so I had two business partners, but we bought the place in August of 2006. And then by December of 2007, those business partners were no longer involved. I'd bought them out, and we were just doing full-time comedy. And we switched over to comedy because theater felt silly, and because comedians, particularly at the time, and I still believe that this is true now, though I don't mean this in a condescending way, but there's no like advocacy for comedians. There's no sort of like centered understanding that comedians are artists. There's no retirement plan. There's no HR department. There's no like stuff that like, even sculptors and like, the Screen Actors Guild, like there's so many different things that exist to protect different artists in different walks of life, but there is no such thing to protect comedians. And I think that part of that is because comedians historically have experienced less community than the average artist's communities do. And it's a singular art form in a lot of ways. I mean, of course we have writers' rooms and we have to collaborate with people all the time, but I think that by and large, sort of like the myth is that you don't need community, you just need yourself to do comedy, which it is kind of true, but it's a little bit easier to live your life when you have community and stuff. And it felt anyway like that was a thing that was needed. And so I started sort of like pointing my efforts towards that in general, and just sort of making the programming be that. And it just was a better fit, and it was a better time. And it was definitely a hang. Better hang than hanging out with actors.
Yeah, I found I started off in improv and sketch comedy before I ever did stand up. Like it took me like probably, I don't know, 5 or more years of already performing like on stage before I had the nerve to even try stand up. And I remember when I was, starting stand up or, hosting mics or hosting shows, I always brought like kind of that performance energy that I had with sketch and improv, which seemed like so different than like, the dudes hanging out just like with their notes and with their nose in their notepads, kind of just waiting to get the hell out of there, to move on to another gig. But I know, I definitely hear you with that. And when it comes to like, creating that community and like, fostering that, I mean, you had so many comics that kind of came up and used your stage as a jumping off point for their careers, for sure.
Yeah, it was a really incredible experience. Hoping to have the same one down here in Austin.
Yeah, What prompted the move? I mean, obviously,
The pandemic.
yeah, 100% pandemic. Hmm. Yeah. What if you like kind of like looking back, like what were some of the some of the huge obstacles that were sort of in your way when it came to keeping a business afloat during that time?
Are you joking? I mean,
No, no, no. I'm like I'm leading the witness because I know the litany of stuff, but this is the first time I think I've
yeah,
spoken to somebody who was a business owner at that time.
it was kind of a nightmare. My staff sort of very quickly realized that it was going to be more lucrative for them to start doing deliveries because everything went to delivery.
Hmm.
Groceries, like 100% of the time it was delivery for quite a while during the beginning of the pandemic when they were talking about was it Crush the Wave or whatever.
Whatever week that was, yeah.
uh, no, it wasn't a week, my friends. In New
The
York, like
month,
6 or 7
yeah,
weeks.
yeah.
So we lost our kitchen staff, and I mean, I lost my kitchen staff. I was down to one employee, and she ran the kitchen and cooked. She was the head bartender at the time. She ran the kitchen and cooked, did a brilliant job. And I was the person who answered the phone, took the orders, answered seamless, did the deliveries.
So you guys had a good. I had your Mexican food. That was the main
Style Mexican, yeah.
really good. Yeah, it was really good.
Yeah, we had to limit the menu, after a while because there were some times where there was just food that we couldn't get. The
Mhm.
lines to get into Restaurant Depot, like at one point, I never experienced this personally, but I was told that the lines were up to like 4, 5, 6 hours for people to get in. And because they were limiting the amount of people that were allowed to go in and shop. And they were spraying down the food. Like it was crazy. It was pretty bananas. And it was impossible for us to make ends meet because I was still having to pay 100% of the rent and the insurance and all of
Mhm.
that stuff. The electricity was set for an average. And so my electricity was something like $2,500 a month. I got the check back at the end of everything once I closed the account, and they had to write me a check for like $7,000, but they were tying that money up. You know what I mean? And
Right.
it was those kinds of things that were happening all the way around. And then on top of it, once I did start, I figured out something, and really it wasn't me. It was comedian Michael Che hit me up and asked me if I wanted to, or if I could find a place to do a thing. And I found a place to do a thing, and the thing got done. And then the governor, I think like 2 months later or whatever, said that it was illegal for us to do comedy, specifically outside, even. So we couldn't even do comedy outdoors. It was illegal. And so the places that I was working with were like legit spots. It wasn't like we were doing like guerrilla comedy. Like we were in places that had like insurance policies and that like, community board, community leaders, like people that were like running nonprofits and stuff like that.
Mhm.
So we couldn't put those businesses in jeopardy. Those businesses had relationships with, those offices. So at the end of the day, basically comedy was specifically singled out. It was put on a chopping block, and that kind of entertainment was not welcome in the city. And it wasn't clear how long that was going to last. And in light of that, what we did, or what I did, was I asked a friend of mine if they were interested in doing like one last thing, and we created like a really cool looking comedy special that had some really amazing names in it. Like, let's see, we had Janine Garofalo, Rojo Perez, Tone Bell, the Lucas brothers, Chris Gethard, Mike Kaplan, Nori Davis, Sam J, Bonnie McFarlane. Oh my God, Carmen Lynch. There's so many comedians. There were so many amazing comedians that were in it. And it is just now I think we're gonna get it released at the end of this year, which I'm really
Nice.
excited about. But that was the last thing essentially that the Creek did that was comedy related. And I took like a couple of months to just sort of like clean out 15 years of stuff. I mean, I still have a Foot Locker that belongs to Nick Turner that's full of his stuff. Eric Bergstrom came the like very last day and like took like a huge like laundry bag full of stuff and maybe a couple other bags under his other arm, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, there's so much that had to get cleaned out and that I needed to like wait for people to get in town to come and grab, you know, like some of the artwork that was hanging up. I wanted to make sure that the comics had an opportunity to come and take it if they wanted it before I took it down here.
Yeah, during that time, yeah, I during that time, well, I had my wife and I, we had our first son, so we were kind of, you know, he's a pandemic baby, so we were, kind of locked up in our in our apartment, so we weren't really, venturing out. But I remember especially like the early months, because my family has a butcher shop in Spanish Harlem, and one of the workers, a longtime worker there, he died from COVID, and my older brother got it. He was like fucked up for, I don't know, maybe close to like 2 months, and then trying to figure out, well, what, how do you do, can you remain open? Will you be allowed to remain open? How many people will be allowed in? And then with you guys too, like you having the restaurant, did you end up building any like outdoor seating? Like did you guys do that?
Well, I'm not a builder by trade.
Okay. I don't know. You told about this show with a giant vagina and a giant cock. I think you guys could have handled it.
I didn't. There were a couple of reasons. One of which was that the precinct came and personally asked me not to, because I could have legally, but we were at that sort of turnaround at the bottom of the bridge.
Okay.
They basically were like, just please don't. And I just didn't know. I felt I was on the community board. Like I felt like, you know what I mean? Like, and I also felt like how many seats, like I could have, if I ate up that whole block, it would make a difference.
Mm-hmm.
Then I could have probably turned it around. But if I ate up that whole block, somebody would have gotten run over. I don't know. Like I feel like we were already in such a financial position that digging out of it would have just been impossible. And when they opened up the restaurants to 25% seating, my place only seats 18. So
I'm doing the math. Yeah,
that's just silly. It's like, you know what I mean? It's just
and how they came up with these numbers too. These fucking arbitrary numbers. I went from 25, and then I remember at one time it was 50%, and then before that you were dealing with, you had to have food, but it couldn't be like wings weren't considered food to have with drink. And yeah, it was just really my heart goes out to you and other business owners who were even just trying to stay afloat and then like navigate all those new rules too.
True. And it was also just like really just hard to like have morale, you know what I mean?
Right.
Like,
yeah,
it takes like a whole heart to do something like that, and it just was a lot of gut punches over and over again, just sort of making it clear that like just was kind of a hostile environment all of a sudden,
Yeah,
and also, I mean, one of the first things that I did was I became a COVID compliance officer for the Screen Actors Guild. Like I took it extremely seriously. I don't believe that I believe that we did everything that we did with an abundance of caution and made sure that safety measures were in place to ensure that, people stayed as safe as possible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. When we, at the beginning of 2021, I shot a series of sketch comedy. And one of the things that I had, one of the people that I hired was a COVID officer. And
Sure.
then it was obviously it was the first time I'd ever had an experience with that. And these were small shoots, but and also like the amount of money that it added to the budget, just having that officer, because everyone needs you have the officer, and then you have everybody who has to get tested, so I'm asking actors like, what was it, 48 hours before, to, schlep all the way to wherever the hell was available for testing. and all that. It was, you're already trying to do, when you're doing something creative, there's already that pressure of performing, and then you have it where there's that creative element, but then also livelihood, and then this on top of that.
And just from a practical point of view, from a production standpoint, that's 30% of your budget. The pandemic was eating up 30% of your budget if you had the audacity to try and film anything during the pandemic.
Yeah.
And there was no way around it.
Yeah. And then I can imagine another, hit to morale. Something that I saw happening was, it seemed like anybody who was trying to do their best to remain afloat, or to, entertain, or to have a, like you guys were doing, then you'd have people come out like, oh my God, you're going to kill people. You're going to get people sick. I mean, well, you're like trying your best.
I didn't get any of that.
You didn't get that? Good.
Stuff that I did was outside. I closed the doors in proper fashion when I was told to. I would say maybe did one thing that I probably shouldn't have done, but it was super fun, and I don't regret it that much because nothing bad happened. But I would have been really upset if something bad had happened.
Do you want to talk about that?
We did like an after party. We probably shouldn't have.
Okay.
It was so much fun, but we probably shouldn't have done it. I definitely felt like a super spreader, but nobody came back to us saying that they got it. So I think we're all right. But yeah, honestly, for the most part, we really did sort of follow the letter of the law, and there was no way to keep the business afloat doing that. I mean, there were some people who were remaining open, which I didn't think was a great idea. I didn't stay open, but I'm also, the majority of the comics that hang out at the Creek, downstairs in a basement, it just doesn't feel like there's not good airflow. There's other places that had better airflow that maybe would have felt more comfortable, but my place wouldn't have been a place that would have been a candidate for that. I wouldn't have ever been comfortable because too many of my employees and too many of the regular comics live with elderly grandparents and stuff like that. That would have never flown. That would have never been all right with me.
Yeah. Are they all trying to get sitcoms based on that? Look, I'm a comic. I live with my elderly grandparent. It's going to be hilarious.
No, not that I've heard of.
Not okay. That was my attempt to.
Maybe you should write that down. Do a little.
Maybe I should.
General.
I have a notepad right here.
There you go.
I could feel you talking about that after party. Whatever regrets, but there's definitely a time. I remember when my wife. Basically being locked up, and unless we were, doing walks around the neighborhood. And then there was a restaurant. We lived in Brooklyn Heights. So on Atlantic Avenue, there's a restaurant called Chez Moi. And it's a nice French place. And they had outdoor seating, and we got really excited because we were finally going out, and we're sitting outside, and 5 minutes into it, it starts pouring rain. And then, the poor manager, he this is one of the few days where he's actually had people, yeah. And then he runs and he goes and he gets this God, what is it, a tent, sort of thing, like a pop-up thing. So I'm helping him open this thing and pop it up, and we're all sort of it's not completely open, and there's our food, and our food's kind of getting rained on, and he's so apologetic. And we're no, this is the best thing that's happened to us in months. We were so happy to be out, and also, happy to, I don't know, help a little bit, so.
My experience was a little different just because I still had to go to Restaurant Depot, and I still had to
right.
There's still people that I would go and check on that there were things that I had to do all the time. So I never really felt like I was cooped up. Plus I lived directly above the venue. So I had the whole venue to run around in and do stuff in. So I didn't feel that. I felt like it was kind of amazing that we could drink in the streets and that there was nobody on the road. You know what I mean? I could drive wherever I wanted to at any time of the day. There's no rush hour. It was amazing.
What currently would take us 45 minutes to 50 minutes to go visit my parents. We were there like I think it was one time we were there in under 20 minutes.
Yeah, of course. I mean, it was absolutely, it was insane. I mean, I remember like just driving to Times Square, parking essentially wherever I wanted, and just wandering around with an open bottle of champagne, drinking and like looking around and like going like, I can't believe this place is empty. It's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. And you think like, this is great. This is amazing. Oh, but the price you have to pay for it. Like,
Yeah,
oh,
like
man.
one day you want that. You don't want that
Exactly.
a year. You know what I mean? Hey, that's cool. You go have your little vanilla sky moment and then you move on. You know what I mean? It's ridiculous.
Oh, what's Cameron? I never saw the movie, but I remember the line Cameron Cruz said, I swallowed your cum or something like that. Cameron, to maybe I'm not. You guys fact check me on that, but I'm pretty sure she said.
Was she the girl in it?
I think so. Yeah, she was the. Yeah.
I picture Selma Hayek, or maybe she was in the Spanish version of it. I'm really just referencing the very opening part of the thing where he's driving through Times Square and it's empty.
Got it.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah, I don't really know who swallows the cum in that relationship.
I mean, I think it should be 50-50. I mean, that's where I'm on that.
I believe in sharing, and that's nice.
Thank you. Speaking of sharing, can you share with us? So you moved to Austin. What prompted Austin? Out of all the other places. Again, I kind of have an idea, but
just somebody called me and asked me if I wanted to, and I was like, sure, if you guys can figure out a way to make it work. And in the meantime, I talked to a handful of my friends. The most passionate one, the one who talked me into it the hardest, who believed in his heart that it was absolutely the right move, would be Tim Dillon, who
is no longer there.
I adore him, and I think he lasted 5 weeks after I moved. Skadoodled. I mean, he's been back a ton since, and he has an awful lot to say about this town. I think one of the last texts that he sent me was, "You're too cultured to be there. Get out while you can. Run." And we're both pretty upset about the restaurant scene, I'll be honest with you, mostly being that it's closed at like 9 to 10 p.m. So it's very difficult to have like an eating experience like after a show.
Wow.
Which makes it hard for a lot of comics. Like it just makes it like your only options are a sparse handful of food trucks and like maybe like a diner and like, you know what I mean? So
yeah. Like,
not to speak for him, but like I kind of understand how it could be difficult to be a performer in town, given that that's the circumstance.
Yeah. Well, I've been to Austin, I think once or twice, and there's a restaurant, Red Ash. Have you ever heard of Red Ash?
Oh,
it's
yeah.
Like, I really enjoyed it. I was really blown away
on his podcast a lot. So
oh, really?
It's difficult to get a reservation now, like at a regular time anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So what I usually do is I just hold one every month and then I'll give it up, or I'll give it over to, I'll have somebody like check in as me and just take it over because it's excellent. I haven't been there. I've only gotten I've gotten like a couple of like odd like appetizer items and made like plates, like platters for comics. And so like I've had like leftovers from that before, but I've never actually eaten their food.
Yeah, I was really blown away because, like you grow up in New York and, you kind of have this, I don't know, snooty attitude. Like, you and Tim were talking about like the food scene. But then, I started realizing I'm like, if I count the amount, like the restaurants that I would go to regularly in New York, it's not that many. Really?
See, I ran a restaurant association in Long Island City, and restaurants were my jam. So I had restaurants in every neighborhood. I had restaurants in New York is the kind of place where, like, I felt like I was doing everybody a disservice by eating at home. I would always feel like it was better for me to go out. I'm helping small businesses. I also was almost all of your options in New York. If you're really like paying attention and trying, can really be mom and pop places.
Right.
And that's not necessarily the case in a lot of towns. So like, it's not necessarily as much fun to eat through a town the way that it is in New York. You know what I mean? New York is just one of those cities that like, yeah, I mean, like if you can get good Chinese food at 3:00 in the morning, why wouldn't you love it there? You know what I mean?
I never got good Chinese food at 3 a.m. in New York, though. I think I
Really?
got, yeah, I think I went, we went to one place in Chinatown, and we had like, they were known for like their Peking duck. And, I had the shits, gave me the shits. Normally I have a tough stomach. So this isn't your fault for bringing that memory up in my.
Well, I mean, I feel like that's also just like one meal, and I think that a lot of people are like, oh, I had the shits and I'm blaming the food. And it's like, really, asshole, it's not the 10 fucking shots of whiskey you had and the fire spacers that you were shoving down your dumb fat face. Okay, it's the duck.
Like
Maybe
really.
it was duck. I don't know. I don't know you. Maybe it was, but maybe it was also a bottle and a half of sake. I have no idea.
Or it's like, really, Lou, that's why you're racist against Chinese people, because of one bad duck, one meal.
One bad duck.
That's it.
Come on. General So would be so disappointed in you.
So disappointed. There's a good documentary on the origin of General So, and I think Netflix probably. I like that. I recommend it if you're not doing anything tonight. Or do you? So are you? What is it like? Owning and being the booker at a club. I mean, are you there every night? Like, what are your hours like?
Well, it's weird because potentially it's all the hours, and then some it can be like a little bit more chill. There are times when I don't necessarily go into the club, but I'm still working a full day's worth of work in my home, just sort of organizing things and booking hotels and trying to set up stuff and getting on the phone and talking to people and reminding them that there's a club out there in Austin that's looking for people and that kind of thing. And then on top of that, like making sure our paperwork is straight, and I handle like the inspections and stuff like that. So like, and we just went through another round of those. So, I mean, it really varies. But yeah, I mean, it's, definitely being there at night and trying to make sure that I'm watching new talent, as well as making sure that the headliners are taken care of, and also giving new talent sort of space to like get better and not like standing there like that watching them going like, oh, you know what I mean? And we still do a handful of open mics, not nearly as many as we used to do at the Creek in New York, but we do we try to do at least one a day. And we have a couple of other shows that are not open mics, but they have improvisational elements. So people are at least sort of doing stuff that's a little bit off the cuff. And yeah, it's like, getting to know the local comedy scene and trying to figure out what they're going to think is funny and trying to find the right comics that are going to be the right fit, and just continuing to try and work with the funniest of my friends, and hopefully getting to work with more and more of them as time goes on,
Yeah. Well, yeah, I was going to ask you about that, sort of the relationship between local comedians and obviously the local audience, and then sort of out of state comedians who've moved there, who emigrated to to Austin. And is there I don't know, it seems like back in like say like the 80s, there was like a big difference between like the Texas comedy scene versus like the LA comedy scene, like kind of road comics, versus people like kind of like stayed put in like the major cities. Have things gone like a little bit more homogenized? Like, is that what you're seeing? Or?
I mean, there's a handful more LA comics floating around, but I wouldn't say that they're like pushing their culture, because that culture is more industry driven. You know what I mean?
Oh, okay.
I think that change happens when you've got a bunch of people in the room that could always maybe be a suit that could make or break your career. So you're constantly trying to do a certain level of comedy, and it kind of like that's when it sort of becomes homogenized, I think, is what you're saying. But I think that's really more a result of of industry influence, and there's not enough industry for that to be a thing here. Having said that, it's not necessarily a bad thing if industry does come, because then it will be a little bit more sort of like relevant on the scale of, LA and New York versus any other place. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because, arguably there's also Chicago, there's also Atlanta,
Right.
there's Denver, there's, you know what I mean? There's an awful lot of scenes out there that aren't New York and LA.
Yeah. Before we started recording, when you told me that you were also the booker, I was like, oh my God, that must be such a pain in the ass. Do you find that, like, being both an owner and a booker? Because I have a friend of mine, I'm friends with Noam Dwarman from the Comedy Cellar.
Yeah,
And I've known Noam, I don't know how many years we're going on now.
okay.
And I know that a lot of people ask him, or you like try to bug him for an opportunity, to like get on that stage. And I just feel I feel weird if I were to ask him, even though we're friends, to do that. Like, does that put you in a I don't know? Do you ever feel like you're put in a strange place, like comedians asking you for spots and all that?
I mean, yeah, I mean, I suppose they do, but people don't get particularly demanding, or they're not mean about it or anything, and I don't think that. I try to be really honest, with my feedback. If I say no to somebody, I like for them to, especially sort of like on the local scene, like I like for them to understand why. A lot of times when people hit me up for headlining gigs, it's not a no, it's just no answer, because I'm trying to figure out where I can fit everybody in, you know what I mean?
Right.
And also, trying to make sure that I'm booking, well, you know what I mean? Trying to
Yeah.
make booking the right like flow of people or whatever. So it's like, I got to catch you on the next, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's hard. Sometimes there's miscommunication. People take it personally, which makes me sad sometimes, but I don't really ever mean it personally. It just feels personal because it's your art. So of course it's personal. It's like, what do you know what I mean? But for the most part, if it's younger comics that are growing, they know that they're going to have a chance to grow with me, that it's not that I'm going to judge them on the comedy that they did year one for the rest of their lives.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And that they have permission to do bad comedy in front of me before they do good comedy in front of me. And I'm not going to hold on to that bad comedy,
Mm-hmm.
That's really kind of the job of the booker, I think, in a way. I don't know.
Well, it sounds cool. It sounds like you've established kind of like an incubator there where people can grow as comedians.
But I don't go out of my way to be like super approachable or anything. You know what I mean? Like you have to it has to take a while for you to like feel comfortable.
Yeah.
Approach me and stuff. I'm sorry to hear that Gnome gets bugged so much. Like that's
no, I don't know how much he gets bugged, but I know some people personally who have like he's done a favor for, and they're like they want to ask him what's happening, and and he's Noam is a very generous guy, very very good dude, and I don't, yeah, and so I think it's sometimes it's putting somebody in that position where it's like, okay, we'll get you up on we'll give you a chance, but I can't promise you anything. And I think sometimes people think that they might be entitled to something.
But I honestly I think that I have to sort of I think that the other side of it's a little bit more of a challenge, is sort of like trying to deal with deal with isn't the right word, but like trying to make sure that keep that all of the agents are happy, that I'm not booking too many of one I'm learning that part of it.
Oh, okay.
That's kind of a new thing for me. I don't know. This has been a completely different kind of year, because New York Creek was very, very different. We didn't have headliners. We didn't have. We barely even charged for shows, and the comedians knew that having a show that didn't have an audience wasn't going to mean that their show had to end. And there were some comics who had shows for 4 years who only had one dear man that used to come to every single one of them. He was a very sweet boy. And I mean, at the end of the day, I feel like that is sort of the greatest platform to sort of be able to figure out your comedy. Unfortunately, it's also very difficult to keep a business like that going. Right. So, it was not, I think, any huge surprise when the Creek wasn't able to make it through the pandemic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I think I told you I wrote a book. It's been scrolling under here. I'm always always promoting this book. It's coming out in September, and it's sort of like my look back at 20 years of doing comedy. And I did most of my stuff at the UCB Theater, and I think sort of the environment that you described it, the early Creek in the Cave was very similar to when I was coming up at the UCB, where it was sort of like you have stage time, you're not guaranteed necessarily an audience, but you are given an incredible amount of license to try stuff and to see what works and what doesn't. I think that's really no matter what year in comedy you're in, I think that's important, but especially as a young comedian coming up. And I'm really fortunate that places like the UCB and the Creek in the Cave were around, and I know a lot of other comedians are too, for sure. Yeah. So I didn't mean to bring it down. What else did I want to ask? Oh, why don't we talk? So you brought up the special that you guys shot at the Creek in the Cave, the last, sort of like the last hurrah there in New York.
Well, it wasn't actually filmed at the Creek. It was filmed at this place called Cookout, which was this space in Brooklyn, which has now been taken over by a different company. I don't remember what they're called now. But yeah, but we filmed it. It had to be a completely outdoor shoot, and we had to have a space that had enough room for Video Village and an audience of 100 people, but distanced. So, cool. Yeah.
And any plans for releasing that?
Yeah, it should be at the end of this year.
Nice. Do you have is it going to be on a platform or?
They're going to tell me next month. I know that it's been like optioned, and then now finishing up the credits, and then it's going to go. So I wish I could tell you right now, but I won't know for another probably 4 weeks or so.
Okay. Yeah. And when I like it's funny when I turn on like on YouTube. Well, it's mostly on YouTube. I get like ads for like Comedy Central. And I'm like, oh, that person used to do my open mic in LA, or oh, I booked that, that person on my show. Are there any like sort of comedians that are kind of under the radar right now that you're really excited about? Anybody?
Oh yeah.
I don't mean to put you on the spot. I put you on the spot because if you don't name the people, then they're gonna be like, "What the fuck, Rebecca?"
Yeah, there's a ton that I'm really excited about. I'm very excited about the Austin comedy scene in general.
That was a very smart play. Yeah. Very smart play to do it. Well, Rebecca, I want to, thank you so much for, for making time, for joining me. Absolutely. And, I wish you the best and thank you for continuing to do what you're doing for comedy and for, humanity. Maybe a little bit.
I'll take it. I really will. Also, I would like to say, keep an eye out for Skankfest New York 2024. We're very excited to be coming back, and we've got Vegas coming up in October. So those are going to be a couple of amazing events that are coming down the pike.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for listening. And again, please order my book, That Joke Isn't Funny Anymore, on the death and rebirth of comedy. Just follow the link in the description or head over to Amazon and search for Lou Perez, That Joke Isn't Funny Anymore. And please subscribe to my podcast. Leave a 5-star review. Why not? Sign up for my newsletter at thelouperez.com. And if you want other ways to support my work, you can join thelouperez.locals.com. And of course, be sure to support my sponsors. PalomaVerdeCBD.com. Use promo code LOU for 25% off purchases over $75. And Black Organic Cold Brew. BLVCKBREW.com. Use promo code LOU for free shipping. Thank you.